Hello and welcome to episode number 54 of Behind the Impact. I'm your host, Jeremy Brown. In this episode, Abby Carlton, the Vice President of Social Impact at LinkedIn, joins the show. Abby, welcome to Behind the Impact.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
I have been looking forward to this conversation since you and I met. Thank you for joining me. We have a lot to get into. You recently joined LinkedIn, so we'll talk a little bit about that. There's a lot that has been going on in the corporate impact space. I would love to get your thoughts and POV on. But before we get into all of that, what I would really like to do is go back in time a little bit and talk a little bit about your career journey and how you got into social impact. Can you give me that story?
Yeah, and I feel like so many social impact leaders, our stories go back quite a ways, and mine is no exception. I really was shaped by my experiences growing up in the rural Midwest in the 1980s and 90s. My dad ran rural regional healthcare systems, and so we bounced around a lot in different Midwestern states. And that experience really helped me see up close what it looks like when opportunity goes away, when opportunity was never there in the first place, and kind of sparked a advocacy bug in me pretty early on. I remember in middle school, I was that kid who was writing letters to the newspaper talking about the underfunding of rural public schools. So that was where I started, and I had almost this happy accident of finding myself studying labor relations at Cornell in undergrad. And I say that because I didn't go in having any real interest in labor relations, but I'd gotten a brochure in the mail that said, "Do you think you might want to be a lawyer? You can go study labor relations at Cornell." And I did think at the time that I wanted to be a lawyer. And that turned out not to be true. But I was exposed to all of this thinking around the labor market and labor economics and social policy. And it was taking all of these things that I had sort of seen and experienced in my childhood and putting them into a framework that I could understand and think about how I might help solve problems or be a part of the solution in that space. And it just really set this path for me of being somebody who has spent her whole career working on economic opportunity in different places and organizations. And so I did that in the earlier years of my career, spent some time in government and nonprofit and academia. And then prior to coming to LinkedIn a couple months ago, I had these two really big chapters. The first was working at the Rockefeller Foundation. So I was there for about 9 years, and I joined as a relatively junior program officer on the jobs portfolio there, and just had this incredible opportunity to really grow up professionally at Rockefeller and learn from people who were such thoughtful and generous leaders in the social sector. So I was there for 9 years. I left as a member of the senior leadership team and leading the jobs work on behalf of the organization, and went to Indeed, which is the other big chapter. And I spent about 7 years there. So I joined Indeed to start the social impact function for the company. And I grew that over those 7 years. And in addition, over my time there, I, at various points, led the accessibility work for the company, product inclusion, environmental sustainability. And now, as of December, I am at LinkedIn and really happy to be here.
Going back to the Rockefeller Foundation, the work that you did there, did you collaborate with corporations at all?
Yeah. Yeah, it actually at the time, I'm not sure that I knew that it was the thing that was driving me to do corporate social impact, but looking back, it was such a formative moment in my career because I was working on jobs and so much. Now, this is back in the sort of in the 2010s. And so much of the philanthropic capital at that point in time in the jobs and workforce development space was going to what we called the supply side of the equation. So, looking at different training programs and educational efforts to help workers build the skills they need so they would be a good fit for a company. And I think on the face of that, there's nothing wrong with that, and that has a really important role to play in the ecosystem. But I think it can have this kind of pernicious side effect of defaulting to, well, let's fix the workers. If we can just fix the workers, then the problems that we have in the labor market will go away. And what I started to feel really frustrated by was the lack of effort on the demand side of the equation. So, thinking about employers in particular as innovators. Where are employers running into challenges in their businesses that could be a win win from a business and impact perspective? Are you having a hard time recruiting the people that you need for your roles? Well, let's look at your job descriptions and see how and who you're recruiting. Are you having challenges with the retention? Well, there are solutions there too that might really move the needle for people who are facing employment barriers and make it easier for them to stay on and grow there or elsewhere. So I just got really interested in what was happening in that hiring experience, especially on the employer side, how they were making decisions. And so it was great. I got to do a lot of that work at Rockefeller, probably more than you would imagine in a philanthropic setting. I was part of the advisory group for an effort called 100,000 Opportunities, which was Starbucks and Walmart and Rockefeller and other foundations and companies all over the United States coming together to try to help out of school, out of work young people connect to jobs. And because this was an employer coalition, there was so much space there to say, okay, well, how do we share best practices? How do we innovate and try new things? Um, but that was, I would say, even more than, oh, I really want to go have a corporate social impact role after I leave Rockefeller. It was really about saying, I am so excited to try to help build solutions in this space that feels like a gap. Where can I go do that? Whatever shape that might take. And then the opportunity came up to go and build the social impact function at Indeed. So that's how I found myself transitioning to corporate social impact.
Throughout that experience, were there any lessons that you learned during that time at Rockefeller Foundation that went with you to Indeed and have stayed with you even to this day at LinkedIn?
Oh yeah. I mean, I feel like for so many of us that early chapter of your career, you probably go in thinking that you have more answers than you actually have, and it's only through the experience of trying and failing and, uh, that the kind of hard won on the job experience that you really start to have that fuller picture. So, I mean, for me at Rockefeller, what would I say? I thought a lot about what is the thing that I distinctively bring to the table? Because so much of the work, whether you're in philanthropy at Rockefeller or at Indeed or LinkedIn, doing this really deep cross functional work within the company and with external partners, is about bringing multiple stakeholders together to look at a problem and try to solve it together. And so I tried to say, well, what is my role, for example, at Rockefeller, that beyond the funding, because the funding is a piece of it, but it's not the only piece. What is the piece that brings me to the table? And I think the thing that really lit me up in that environment that I've tried to carry forward is being able to look at the system and take a step back because so many of us, we're running a thing, we're in our day job, we're heads down, and a gift of being at a place like a foundation that has a global scope is to be able to say, okay, I'm seeing this cluster of organizations that are doing this work over here and this over here, and these two don't seem to be talking together. And could we set a table that would bring these different perspectives together? And could we start to support a narrative that sits over this body of work and makes it greater than the sum of its parts? And that, even though working in corporate social impact and in some of the more operational opportunities I've had in doing that, that still holds true because all of us are in our own silos in a corporate setting through nobody's fault really, but to be able to be that person who is kind of connecting with everyone, talking with everyone, understanding where the pieces might come together has really brought up some interesting opportunities that might not have surfaced otherwise.
And so after Rockefeller Foundation, you went to Indeed. You mentioned that you were there for 7 years. You started the social impact function at Indeed. Take me back to that time. So you're just now joining Indeed. You're starting up the social impact function from scratch. Where did you start?
I'm laughing because it was just without question the craziest time of my entire life. I have triplets who are now 8 years old. And when I joined Indeed, they were, I think, 9 months old. So I was going to Indeed to start a new corporate social impact function. I had never worked in corporate social impact before. I'd done a ton of work on partnerships and philanthropy, but I mean, they were taking a risk to bring in somebody who had never worked in that exact setting before. And I knew that, and I carried that with me. Um, but it was just, I just remember some people thinking I was a little bit crazy to be making that jump at that particular time. But the fact was, and this is very true for LinkedIn as well, the mission of the company was my mission. Indeed's mission is to help people get jobs. LinkedIn's mission is to create economic opportunity for every member of the global workforce. And so I was sitting, in my latter days at Rockefeller, thinking so deeply about employer hiring practices and more inclusive hiring, and then had this opportunity to go to Indeed with a blank slate in a way and stand something up. I couldn't pass that up. So that is the context in which I made my jump into corporate social impact. And one of the things that was really unique about that is that because we didn't have an established team and there wasn't anybody really saying, oh, social impact needs to be done this way, I had a lot of latitude to just sit with our executive sponsors and say, what are the core levers for impact in this business? And how can we pull those? Where can we pull them? Where can we push on the edges of our mission to help even more people get jobs? And I don't take that for granted. That is a really special thing to be able to walk into and not be sort of beholden to doing anything any which way. But that led very much to a focus on our core platform and products. How do we work alongside core product teams to understand the problems that they are trying to solve for our users, whether it's job seekers or employers on the other side of the equation, and see where we can add on to those efforts. And that there was a lot of like trial and error there, but where that started to really gain steam was almost by serving as a kind of a user experience research and data science arm for some of these teams. So we would go out into the communities with our partner organizations and try to understand the experiences of the people that they were serving and where Indeed was working for them, where it wasn't working for them, and then bring those insights back to our product team. So we were giving them a picture of the experiences, in some cases, of millions and millions of users from a vantage point that they hadn't considered previously. Criminal records is a great example of that. We were working with organizations who were serving people who had criminal records. In the US alone, 70 million people have a criminal record, but that wasn't really built into the product experience at first. But as we all know, it has a really profound impact on hiring and where you can get a job. And so just by going into the community with our partners, bringing back some of the insights from employers who were fair chance employers who wanted to, were open to recruiting from that population and were having a hard time doing so, from job seekers who were telling us in a bunch of ways that they needed to be pointed to the jobs that were going to be more open to them. We're able to then take that back to the product teams and help influence their roadmap, and how they build for our users. And that for me, really shapes how I have thought about corporate social impact since then. And it will take different shapes and there will be other pieces, but at the core of it, for a company like Indeed, and now for a company like LinkedIn, I think there is so much opportunity when you have a vision or a mission like ours to say, how do we just make sure that we're broadening who we're serving through the core and then build around that in the ways that make sense.
What I love about this example is it showcases just how valuable of a role corporate social impact can play. You mentioned going out into the community, working with community partners to then surface insights that you can take back to your product team and have them improve the product. That's just a great example of an opportunity for corporate impact leaders to make a meaningful impact within their companies by being able to surface insights that can help the actual product.
I mean, it has proven to be one of my biggest insights that I don't think I could have anticipated from the outside. It's not necessarily the thing I thought I was gonna go in and do, um, but the other side of that coin that I'm really excited about is there's it's a sort of a two-directional street where in one way we can go out into the community and bring those insights back to our product teams, our marketing teams, our sales teams, what have you. But then also how can we bring our teams into the community to sit alongside people who are using our products and really learn side by side. So that's one of the things when I joined LinkedIn a couple months ago, I already knew about when I walked in the door because LinkedIn, and this is no thanks to my efforts, but I walked in the door and inherited a really robust program called LinkedIn Coaches. And this is a program where people, employees across the business get to go out into the community and sit with people through a nonprofit partner and help them use our platform. And we learned so much. I've done it now a couple times since I've started. You learn so much by sitting with someone and seeing like where something you might have thought was easy is hard, or that they can't find a certain thing, or it's hard to tell your story in a way, or maybe if you have less experience, you feel a little more self-conscious about building a profile on the platform. And just taking that back then to whatever their day job is, whether you're an engineer, whether you work in marketing, whether you work in legal, now instead of social impact just being a function within the company where certain of us wear hats that say social impact on them, you're turning it into a capability that exists across the company despite whatever role you might have. And for me, that's something I'm really keen to continue pushing on, and because I think that's where we start to scale our impact as practitioners even more.
With that program, how do the insights get back to the product team? Do you have like a standing, maybe quarterly call with product managers and that you feed them those insights? What does that look like?
Yeah, it's a great question. It's actually something that I am thinking a lot about. You know, I've come in and I'm listening and learning and understanding where we are. I think we do some of that right now in different, more informal ways. A product team will say they want to volunteer as part of their offsite. They'll go out and do that. They'll debrief that as a team, but I think there's even more that we can do there. I'm really excited about taking that next step. As you say, how do we build the machine around this so those insights are coming back in a more structured, actionable way that ties to the priorities of certain teams. So if you're a team that's thinking about how to make profiles more robust and higher quality, well, how can we make sure that the insights we're getting around profile creation in particular get to that team in a way they can action? Because everybody's really busy. You can't just throw the kind of raw or anecdotal data at them. So that's one of the things I'm eager to continue to build out as I get settled in here at LinkedIn.
One thing I want to go back to, so you mentioned when you joined Indeed, you had never had a corporate social impact role. And that's the case for many practitioners. Many of them, as you're well aware, come from the nonprofit sector and they jump right into leading or building a function. If you were chatting with another practitioner or somebody in the nonprofit space that wants to make that career transition into a corporate impact role, what advice would you give that person in terms of where they should start?
Yeah. I think that corporate social impact roles are really highly variable. So I've now held two. And so I know what my experiences are for the two that I've held, but I don't pretend to be an expert in what that looks like in all different types of companies. I have my peer set and we talk, and so I think I have a view on it. But the reason I mention that is because I think it can really feel quite different depending on what the role is and where it sits within the organization. So if you are someone who comes from a philanthropy background, like I did prior to joining Indeed, going to a corporate social impact role where you're in maybe a .org that's a separate legal entity from the business, and you have a grant making portfolio, that might feel actually pretty similar to the experience that you had in the philanthropy that you were in. Now, philanthropies are all come in all different shapes and sizes as well. Um, in my case, going from a philanthropic role at Rockefeller to a role that was really operational in the ways that I was describing before. We were sort of thinking about user research. I didn't even know what user experience. I didn't know what UX stood for when I walked in the door as a corporate social impact leader. So it was a real shift for me in every way. Um, I think regardless, whatever you're coming from and going to, one of the biggest changes is that generally in the social sector, the thing that you are doing is the core of the organization. It's the thing that all of the support functions are structured around. Um, for example, the grant making portfolio I led at Rockefeller, we had a lot of support for that, which was one of the core things that we did. I go over to Indeed, and that table is set for a different purpose. And so you really have to rewire your thinking pretty quickly around what is that thing that I can bring to the table? How can I understand deeply what the core of the business is about? How do we measure success? What are our key metrics? What keeps our executives up at night? Where are we going? Where have we been? Because the more you can just steep yourself in that, you do not have a license to operate the second you walk in the door. And you're going to find that um, it just feels really, really different if you haven't been in that environment before. So taking that time to say, what makes this place tick and how can I add to that, is probably my biggest piece of advice.
That's so important. I know you and I chatted about this before. Many practitioners, when they come from the nonprofit sector, they bring with them a very pure mentality around giving back and making a difference, which is great. But they're coming to a sector that is a different beast. And how they approach the work in the nonprofit sector isn't the same in the corporate sector. It's not going to be the same in terms of being able to get to that next level. There's so many more things a practitioner needs to be aware of, and you mentioned several of those things. Understanding what the business cares about, the key metrics, the stakeholders, everything that makes a business run, and then connecting the work that they're doing back to that. So all that to say, driving business value. It's becoming such an important topic as of late for practitioners to really wrap their heads around.
Yeah, yes, I completely agree with that. And it is interesting. There is this, I think both if you've grown up in the social sector or if you are just more junior in your career, I've seen many times with really good intention, people having this very sort of purist mentality about impact and what it is and what it looks like. And I think when you come to a corporate social impact setting, you have tools in your toolkit that you have never had before. And that is so exciting and inspiring. And to get to be part of this much bigger engine for economic growth is it allows you to have conversations about impact that you didn't have before, but you also have to understand that you are operating in the context of a for-profit business. And sometimes that means we get 60 or 70% of the way there toward a thing that we think is really important, but we're not going to be able to get that other, part of the way there versus being really purist about it and we're going to get 0 to maybe 10% of the way there. And I say that like that's hard. That's a really hard if you were somebody who I think back to Abby who was writing the letters to the editor back in middle school, like, I don't think she would have liked that answer, and that's not for everyone, but I do think it's something to stare at if you were considering making the jump into corporate social impact. There is really good and powerful work you can do, and just like any other organization out there, there are real constraints that you have to kind of think about and understand like what's the right place for me given the trade-offs of any place that you might land.
I would love to get your thoughts on executive buy-in. I am a firm believer that the work of corporate impact doesn't grow unless executives fully buy in. And not just, oh, that's nice to have. Let's do it when we go public. I'm talking about like fully buy in. Companies like LinkedIn, companies like Okta and several other companies, Twilio, their executive teams fully buy into the work. And it's beautiful to see and you see the impact that they're able to make through that work. When it comes to executive buy-in, what are the misconceptions that practitioners might have when it comes to getting executive buy-in, but also sustaining it?
Oh, that's such a good question, and definitely in that category of things I had to learn through trial and error in the corporate social impact space. Um, all right, let's see, misconceptions. Well, here's one. I think that a lot of folks would believe that if you got the buy-in and the sponsorship of someone at that C-suite level and they were a champion of this work, that that would be enough. I do not believe that that's enough. I think it is necessary, but insufficient. And I say that from personal experience. I have had the really fortunate opportunity to work with C-suite leaders who just deeply buy in and believe in this work, and it is a game changer. And when you then have to go to the folks at that kind of VP level and their leadership teams and do the work together cross-functionally in the company, that's not enough. It'll get you in the door, it'll get you the meeting, but it is not going to get you priority on the roadmap unless you can really understand what is this team solving for and how can I help them solve it. And maybe in another era that wouldn't have been true. But my experience is now if I go talk to a product VP and say, hey, my team would really like to do this thing, if I can't tie it to their metrics, then it becomes priority 47 on their list of things that they have to do. Whereas if I can say, I know you are working, so I'll give a real example. One of the things that I'm so excited about at LinkedIn is we're spending a lot of time thinking about how we bring the next generation of users, of members onto the platform and support them in the right ways. That is great from a social impact perspective because my team is thinking a lot about the experience of young adults who face employment barriers, who are navigating this age of AI. So when teams are thinking about that question of our next generation of members, we can go to them and say, here's a place where we can tell a story, where we can establish a partnership, where we can get your message to a broader audience, whatever it might be for that particular team. So I think that a misconception is you get the CEO or you get someone on the C-suite and that's enough. I don't think that it is. I think it's necessary but insufficient. I have found that focusing on that VP and one level below level is equally important and it needs to look a little bit different. And the last thing I'll say there is I think sometimes it can be easy to anchor on the support of one or two people, but people come and go. And so we really, really have to think about like if we anchor too much on this one person is going to help us get it done, and we don't take the time to build the infrastructure and embed it in a more sustainable way, then we might be in for a rude awakening when that person moves on to their next opportunity.
That's such a great point. And that brings up a question. Throughout your career, have you ever encountered somebody at the C-suite level that just didn't fully buy into the work that you were doing? And if so, did you do anything to convince them to get on board?
Yes. Yes, definitely to your first question about encountering people who weren't on board. And I think that that can kind of take two shapes. There's the person who just doesn't get it or it doesn't rise to the top of their priority list and you've tried a bunch of ways and it's not going to be their thing. And then there's the person who's the blocker and who actually actively thinks that whatever it is that you're trying to get company time and resources toward is something that should not happen. And that's a I think a different and a harder conversation. But frankly, if you don't that first type that I mentioned, they can block you. Like that can be a problem, but that second type, as I think folks who are listening to this will likely agree with, that can be a real issue. And so for me, when I have encountered that second type, it goes back to the thing that we all know so deeply in social impact work. It is all about relationships and just trying to really get to know that person, the problems that they're trying to solve, what it is, like what's behind this thing, what's at the root of what's giving them pause. Because I found in obviously I can't speak in too many specifics about this, but I have found in those instances that by sitting down with them and getting to know them and digging a bit deeper, it's often not as high of a wall as I thought it was. There's some things that sit under it. Well, how would we measure this? Or would this be at the expense of that? Like we can actually answer those questions. We can dig in on that together if we understand them. It's really hard to dig in on it together when it's just the no, not interested, not important. Um, so that's I don't I'm not going to pretend that's an easy situation to be in. It's a really tricky one, particularly with those blockers, but that's the approach that I've found is most successful.
One of the things that I heard from another practitioner that I had on the podcast when it came to dealing with, executives that, they basically fall into that kind of second type bucket. They started inviting them to volunteering events and getting them involved and participating. And then the more they did that, the more they kind of realized, oh, okay, this is actually a valuable thing for the company, for the employees, and obviously for our community. That got them on board. I thought that was a really interesting way of utilizing volunteering in a way to get that buy-in.
I I love that. I really agree with that. And, it goes back to what we were saying earlier around trying to bring insights from the community into the company and trying to bring the company into the community. Um, I I actually might have been a little bit of a skeptic around that going into my corporate social impact career because I had been in this setting where Rockefeller and the work that I did was the core and there were things that sat around it and I didn't necessarily feel like I had to do that piece of it to advance the work that I was doing. It felt like a nice to have and I spent a lot of time in my personal life volunteering, but I didn't feel like I had to mobilize our executives, for example, on that. But then I come to Indeed, and it was a really different situation where I was doing the work of introducing social impact to a company and introducing some of our users in a new way, new attributes of them to our company, and I think volunteering is indispensable for that. So I spent a lot of time in my first year when I had the opportunity taking our executive team, our VP plus team out into the field to do some of that, coaches type work alongside alongside users. And it really shifted perspectives in a way that me coming down and sitting across the table from you and you telling you the story just really couldn't. And I see that culture at LinkedIn as well of, across levels, across departments, people just valuing the learning of being able to go out and connect with our members.
As you mentioned, you joined LinkedIn recently.
Yeah.
Take me back to the first day up until now. Where has your focus been? Obviously, there's a lot. LinkedIn has a, like you mentioned, a very robust social impact program and a fantastic team. Where has your energy been focused?
Yeah. It really all of those things are true. And one of the things that drew me to LinkedIn in the first place goes back to our conversation about executive sponsorship. During my time at Indeed, had the opportunity to work closely with Jessica Jensen, who was the chief marketing officer for a period of time at Indeed and had since, before me, moved to LinkedIn and is the chief marketing officer at LinkedIn right now. So as I was thinking about my next move, it's just we know how important it is to have someone at that senior level who really gets and understands the work, and in Jessica's case, just deeply understands how it connects to marketing and brand and the story that we wanna tell about ourselves out in the world in a really authentic way. So, I just share that as, beyond the piece around economic opportunity, it was a huge draw for me, to be able to reunite with an executive who I knew I could do this could work with in that way. So let's see, first day at LinkedIn. I mean, my first day at LinkedIn was getting my computer and going through all the stuff. I was in the Mountain View. I can't remember if I mentioned this earlier. I'm based in the New York City area, but I was in the Mountain View office of LinkedIn and just getting to sort of get a feel of the place and get all set up there, which was, I mean, the team really does it right. Like it was a pretty incredible day of onboarding. But since then, um, it's been amazing. I've spent really those first couple of months, as you might expect, just listening and learning and doing the thing that I mentioned before is my advice to others when they come into a new place, not assuming that I know what makes the place tick or what the priorities are, and just building relationships with my team, building relationships with my peers and with our leaders to just really get a feel for the place and where we've been. At, at Indeed, I was the first social impact employee, so I built that team. But I'm coming into LinkedIn with a team that has been up and running for 15 years at this point. So there is a ton of incredible foundational work in place that I need to really understand. I need to know what we're doing and where we've been and why we made those decisions before I can start to put my stamp on it. So I spent the first couple of months doing that work, and now I think I'm about 4 months in, so it's been in the kind of last couple of weeks transitioning with my leadership team to say, "Okay, let's honor where we've been and pull forward what is really working for us, but let's also stare at the moment that we find ourselves in and think about where we might need to evolve." You and I haven't talked that much about this yet, but this moment of uncertainty and the way that AI is changing so many things in the labor market and for teams and for the organizations we serve and for our members, it is such a it is a moment that really requires us as social impact leaders to take a step back and say, how do we create economic opportunity? Where does that look the same and where does it look different? So those are the conversations that we're having as a leadership team right now and in partnership with teams across the business. Because as you might imagine, this is a really central question for LinkedIn as a company at this moment too.
So you mentioned LinkedIn Coaches that as one of the programs that LinkedIn has. I would love to dive a little bit more into LinkedIn's Future of Work Fund and learn more about that. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yes, absolutely. So when you think about our social impact team at LinkedIn, at the highest level, we are aligned with LinkedIn's vision to create economic opportunity for every member of the global workforce. And then if you go a level below that and think about my team, our role is really to champion that every in the vision statement and think about how we can reach the broadest group of people possible, especially those who are having a hard time navigating the labor market right now. So those are the kind of top two layers that inform our work. And I mentioned we're really focused right now on young people who are transitioning into the world of work for the first time and doing so with just so much change and uncertainty around them. So the Future of Work Fund is really our core partnerships, program to be able to support efforts and organizations that are using AI to create economic opportunity. That is a global fund. It's something that the team has been working on long before I joined, but has evolved to that focus to meet this moment. And it has taken on, underneath that banner, a couple of different key focus areas recently. One is around career navigation. So, for example, we have a partner called Career Village, and they are using AI to democratize access to career coaching for young people in particular. And then another focus is skilling. And we're working with organizations under the Future of Work Fund who are thinking deeply about how you give people the AI skills and tools and ability to really succeed in this next chapter. And we have a great partnership called AI Careers for Women. That's in India. It's work that we do with the government in India, nonprofit partners, and Microsoft to really help this next generation of women leaders in India have the AI tools that they need to make a difference. So those are some of the flavors of partners that we have in the portfolio. And then one of the things that is really exciting to me is that it is not just about the funding that goes toward those partners, although obviously that's important, but we have this sort of holistic support approach that we take with our partners that leans on a lot of the pro bono resources that we can bring to bear. So that includes things like LinkedIn premium subscriptions for the beneficiaries of our partner programs, using our ad program and ad grants to help these organizations advertise their work and their programs and recruit new members on the LinkedIn platform. And then, of course, the coaches program and bringing those hands on resources to our partners. So, some of that is work that we do, I would say not alone, because I don't think any of us in this sector can afford to go it alone these days. But some of those grants are sort of bilateral relationships, but in a lot of cases, it is working with other corporates, working with government, multiple nonprofits in a more coalition type way, like the AI Women program that I was talking about in India, to just try to leverage our resources, bring them together, and expand our impact.
What I love about this program is that it's not just funding. You're taking the full kind of breadth of LinkedIn's resources and applying it to the program. So you mentioned there's the funding, you have employees involved from the LinkedIn coaches, you have pro bono, the ad, all that stuff, all the great things that LinkedIn has in its platform. You're really unleashing that in a way to drive meaningful impact. I love that.
Yeah, I do too. It's something that I wasn't something I really understood until I walked in the door and started learning about just the depth of our partnerships. And I think that goes back to this idea of what are the core levers that we have to pull to drive impact. So another piece of the work that we do at LinkedIn is working with, probably won't surprise you given my background, but working with our R&D teams to think about where we can innovate around our products to pull that lever and to bring those resources to bear. But it's just, I think the dollars can be a piece of it, but we also have these other really meaningful supports that we can bring to partners in the form of pro bono, in the form of product innovations, and that's just for me one of the most exciting parts of the job.
One of the words that you mentioned a couple of times is uncertainty. And so I want to kind of take a step back and look at the entire kind of corporate impact landscape. There's a lot of uncertainty for a lot of practitioners right now. And I would love to get your thoughts on how you see the field itself taking shape given how everything's going right now, and then maybe the opportunity in the future.
Yeah. I I think we just have to really name that, right? It is a moment of uncertainty in just so many facets of life. It's uncertain to be a corporate social impact practitioner. It's there's so much uncertainty for members of LinkedIn who are trying to figure out how to navigate the labor market. Um, and actually, I think that's another one of the things that drew me to LinkedIn in the first place is how can we, in this moment of really heightened uncertainty, play that sort of lighthouse role for people and help them understand, make sense of the uncertainty and think about what are those next couple of steps that I can take right now and not feel like I'm sort of paralyzed with fear. So I think it's real. I think we're all navigating it in a bunch of different ways. One of the things I've observed as a result of that, or I think it's as a result of that, I'll be curious to hear what you think about this, is I've seen social impact teams kind of go in two different directions. I've seen social impact teams thrive that are really just deeply embedded in the business in the way that we talked about before, who have done the work to get the metrics right, to be able to align with um, business strategy and rhythms and show the value that they can bring to those top priority initiatives for the company. I think that Microsoft Elevate is a great example of that and the work they're doing to bring technology solutions to educators and to the nonprofit sector and just weaving the social impact work into that. And then I think there's another way that I've seen corporate social impact functions go in the last couple of years, which is really anchoring to more of the talent strategy approach. And it's not a binary. Of course, there are efforts that sit across these two, but I've seen other corporate social impact functions really go back to basics in terms of employee recruitment and retention and engagement and centering that in their program. Because that continues to be for the foreseeable future something that our business leaders care a lot about. So in both cases, it has to be what is a core business need that I am anchoring the work to. But I've seen both of those different flavors. And then I guess if I take your question about what are the opportunities that I see, I think there are two that are really top of mind for me right now. If I'm putting my AI optimist hat on, which I do a lot, but I'm putting my AI optimist hat on, I think there is so much opportunity right now to point these new tools and technologies at the problems that we have all been working to help try and solve for decades. And I'm not saying that it's going to be easy or quick, but we have that opportunity as practitioners to say this wherever the future of work is going, wherever the field of social impact is going, that doesn't just have to happen to us. We can help shape that. And part of shaping that is saying, how are we going to understand these tools and what they can do for the problems that we care about and resource that through the work that we do in our organizations? So that's one hope and opportunity that I have. And then I would say the other one is a little bit more for us as teams. We should do the same. We should hold ourselves to that same standard of really understanding in our organizational context, how can we use AI to make significant leaps in how we do our work? So maybe when you and I are talking 3 or 4 years from now, it's not me saying, oh, we have partners in the R&D organization who are helping us to innovate around features for core products that could help people facing barriers. Maybe we're saying, yeah, my team used Claude Code to build some prototypes, and that's something that we have. That's a capability that we have on our team now that we didn't a couple of years ago. So those are, I'm not sure, I think they're both opportunities and hopes for our field as we look forward.
Just a quick comment on your observations. So I'm seeing the same thing. Especially when it comes to anchoring to talent, and this goes back to my core belief that a lot of practitioners are trying to figure out how to make their function more durable within their company. And one of the ways to do that is to have programs or initiatives that have clear ROI that are really easy to explain to executives, and executives instantly understand the value it adds to their business. And one of those kind of areas happens to be talent. So leveraging volunteering to build team camaraderie and using it as a team building exercise, for example, there's it's easier to explain the ROI of volunteering and the impact it has on talent than probably many other kind of initiatives or programs that a practitioner has in their kind of toolbox. And so, anchoring to talent, I'm not surprised that a lot of practitioners are kind of anchoring on that.
Yeah, I'm nor am I. And I think what feels a little less clear is whether that's for how long that will be our new normal. Is that something that, 3 years from now, we'll see the pendulum swing a little bit more, or is that, a couple of chapters, of that ahead of us? I'm just not sure. I also think it social impact functions tend to take on the flavor of where they sit in an organization. So right now, I sit in a marketing function, and we are really closely aligned with our brand work. I think that is a phenomenal place for us to be when we're thinking about bringing our next generation of users onto the platform and supporting them. I have sat in HR functions before, among other places, and I think that is often a good organizational home when you're aligning to the talent strategy. So I wonder too, and I don't know the answer to this, maybe you do, if we're seeing social impact functions in this moment moving more often as well to different organizational homes within the company. I don't have a good sense of that.
Well, I can say that I have, throughout the conversations I've had with practitioners, I've seen func impact functions show up in obviously HR, marketing, legal. I'm trying to think of any other ones. Those are the core product. Actually, that was an interesting one. In a recent episode that I had, one of the leaders, her function sits under the product team because they're kind of a consumer package good company, and so it makes sense to have that function live in product. But I thought that was interesting. That was the first time that I ever heard of a impact function sit under the product team. What's something about this work that you know now, but could have only learned the hard way?
So many things. I just feel like I've, those people who say that they didn't need to get an MBA because they sort of learned it the hard way. I think I have been humbled in a way how about the work of doing social impact in a corporate setting. My last couple of years at Rockefeller, as I was moving closer and closer to thinking about employer talent practices and innovation and, oh, this could happen in the corporate sector and this could happen. I think I was also just like really naive about what it would take for those things to happen or why they weren't happening in the first place. So to now have this education through multiple experiences of corporate social impact, of just understanding that there are a lot of pressures and complexities and priorities that you have to understand and align with to be able to get your work done. Even things like working on quarterly cycles or working for a public company. I mean, these are just all things that I don't think you can really understand until you're there and doing the work. I had never worked with sales teams before. I had never been in an organization that sold anything before. And that was such a light bulb moment of thinking, we have thousands of people who are on the front lines every day talking to employers, understanding their pain points, understanding how they use our products. So in a similar way, where we talked before about how we're really trying to bring the perspectives of nonprofits and the organizations they serve to bear, I found that partnering with our sales and client success organizations to understand what they were hearing and to be able to use them as a channel to bring ideas and solutions to our clients was just this incredibly powerful and valuable thing that I just would not have thought of. I think that's true in a lot of different ways, learning how to work with marketing and how marketing functions and how you can be a good partner there or legal. So it has just been this incredible eye-opening experience that has been humbling at times for sure, but has also helped me understand levers that can be pulled that I just didn't see before as a practitioner, and that's been, just really it's been really special.
Well, Abby, thank you so much for joining me and sharing all of your career lessons and experiences. I am really looking forward to seeing your role evolve at LinkedIn. I feel like there's so much opportunity, and what you've already alluded to as well. So I can't wait to see where you and the team goes in the future.
Thank you, Jeremy, appreciate it.
This episode is brought to you by Social Impact World, the intelligence layer for corporate impact. To learn more, go to socialimpactworld.com. I'm Jeremy Brown. Thank you so much for listening to this episode of Behind the Impact.